Perfect. It looks like Jan has jumped back in. Jan, we've started the recording. And what you missed when you jumped out is Tandon was saying that they're in the 8th grade and they're doing like a mini master / immersion type deal at Vanderbilt right now, which I thought was so incredibly impressive.
Oh, fun. Yeah, that's
Thank
great.
you. Thank you.
I was like, well, are you a junior, a senior? Because Vanderbilt, I could only imagine that is a little overwhelming. I would be overwhelmed, but is very interested in behavioral sciences. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Perfect. So because there's something with psychology, right?
Yeah, mainly like social psychology because I'm actually doing this research proposal and I'm writing about that. So mainly social psychology.
Well, what is your research proposal? Because not to say double dip, but if you are working on something that is far along as a research proposal, I don't see why you can't turn some version of that into a science fair project.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. So the thing is, I haven't fully decided my question that I have to answer for my research proposal,
And
but
that's
it's like
the
it kind of
beautiful thing
relates
about
to like,
Science Club.
huh?
That's the beautiful thing about Science Club.
Yeah.
You got to work out some of those, like maybe not super defined things yet, but tell us, what do you have?
So it's kind of just, it's very simple because we can't really do an experiment since it's online, but it's about like emotion and how people, how do I explain this? How people like group, I don't know how to explain it, how people group different colors with emotions. It's very simple, but yeah.
Well, actually, so granted, behavioral science is not my background, but I do know that they do like MRI imaging of people's brains, and they show them pictures and see what parts of their brain are activated, and this color means this, and that color means that. And the really interesting thing, it might be an MRI, it might be a PET scan. But the interesting thing about that is that might just be open source data. Do you know what that is?
No, actually, can you explain that?
Absolutely. So something like open source data is something that has already been de-identified. So as opposed to there being like a name and a birthday and things that can identify Sandra as Sandra, Jan is Jan, Tandon is Tandon, that has all been stripped and removed. And it's data that you could use for a project because it's publicly available and online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so let's see here. I am just going to make our window a little bit smaller and keep talking, because the interesting thing about behavioral sciences, and looking at something that has to do with humans in any regard would likely require an IRB. Are you familiar with that, or an internal review board?
Not really.
Ask
Yeah.
all the questions. It's okay to not know.
Okay.
But IRB is essentially to make sure that we're being ethical scientists, so that we're doing everything on the up and up. um it's making sure that you're not doing anything that is potentially questionable or harmful or might result in some sort of long-term side effect or consequence. So you essentially answer some questions about your project, what you're doing, how you're going to be doing it, like what your timeline for planning to do such a thing is. And somebody says, hey, this is a good research plan, this is minimal potential impact on whoever. And if you're using something like open source data, you're not physically touching a patient, you're not giving a medication, you're not saying eat a food or do something like that. You would more than likely get something called an expedited review, where they're just like, essentially like a stamp that says, yes, we acknowledge that this person is interested in science that impacts humans or animals, but the potential repercussions are low, if any. And this person can proceed with their research project or their science fair project or their study. And that, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So is it called an IRB?
I as in internal, R is in review, and B is in board. So IRB.
Okay. Do I have to get that if I do it something in behavioral sciences then?
Um, my recommendation for anything in human science is start it early. And if you don't need it, they'll tell you you don't need it. Or B, if it's something like this, it would be something as quick as an expedited review, which would be rather quick. However, Kimberly Gwynn, who was in the main room and she was explaining why we record and whatnot, she's the one that does all of the IRB, assessments and reviews. And she just might need some time if a lot of people are interested. That's why I'd recommend doing it early, just in case.
Okay. Okay.
So let me get caught up a minute. I know that Tandon is doing this at Vanderbilt, but where does she live? Or,
I'm actually in Middle Tennessee right now, so I
okay,
took a picture of the QR codes that she had
right.
for the science fair.
Okay. All right, very good. And so who are you writing the research proposal for?
So it's for the class. The final project is the research proposal and like the presentation. So
And
yeah,
you're in the 8th grade?
yeah.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Um, so when is your research proposal due?
It's actually due this Monday and I haven't started it yet. So I'm
Okay.
still a little worried.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think the course it's like a monthly course and I think it just ends maybe next week. So yeah.
Okay.
So, real quick, while Jan was asking you some additional information, I was looking, and granted, with permission of whoever in your household, you could go online, and all I typed into Google, or in your case, I might recommend Google Scholar, is let's see here what I searched. MRI of human brain and emotional intelligence. And it's actually called a functional MRI or an fMRI. And the results are, can an MRI show emotion? Do emotions show up on brain scans, emotional intelligence, things like that, which kind of sounds very closely aligned with what you're potentially interested. Is that correct, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. I just searched it up as well because I've been using Google Scholar for like the articles I need. So yeah, that's actually pretty close to what I'm doing.
Yeah. So what I would recommend, and granted, you might be on two different timelines with whatever your research proposal this week is versus Science Club, since Science Club, I think Middle Tennessee was middle March for the science fair.
I think it was March 31st. Yeah.
Okay, middle end of March.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you needed to do IRB, granted, it would not go through Dr. Gwen because she does Southeastern. But you would scan that QR code and get connected with this other science fair. But if they follow kind of a similar timeline to what we do, I would suspect that they would want your IRB submitted probably no later than January.
The 1st of January.
Oh,
Because I think ours is due the 14th, January the 14th. So you've got plenty of time. And
yeah.
So
I
also,
am going on a trip though, so I have to.
The rules with IRB, working with human subjects or animal subjects, is you cannot start your research until you have IRB approval. Granted, again, you're not touching humans, you're not making them try something or test something or asking them to complete a survey or anything like that. But those are generally the rules to make sure that everything is on the up and up.
Okay, so I do after I scan that QR code, is there like an email I get of who I can contact or?
I haven't tried scanning it, so I'm not exactly positive, but I'm willing to bet it's going to take you to an informational page and it would give you some general information about this, that, and the other.
Okay. So I actually haven't been able to attend many meetings for this, like virtual science club lately. I've been very busy. So I haven't gotten a chance to like think exactly about what my like science fair, like what my project will be. But
And one of the really nice things about Science Club is that you come here to talk through ideas, to say, hey, this is what I'm starting with. And it sounds like emotional intelligence and things like that. What else about that interests you? Like, let's see if we can help steer you down a more defined path.
I actually haven't thought much. I do like the subject of emotional intelligence. I feel like since I'm already doing something similar to that for my proposal, but I'm actually not too sure. Uh, I don't know really. Maybe just like, couldn't I just do emotional intelligence in general? Like, if that makes sense.
Potentially, however, think of it as so that is incredibly broad,
That's
and
true. Yeah.
we're not going to really be able to define a question from that, because if I just said I'm interested in emotional intelligence, my initial thoughts would be, what about that interests someone? Is it that puppies make people happy, or kindness makes people happy, or thinking about things like what leads to positive or negative emotions, what this interaction causes in the brain, that, like, what center of the brain that it affects, because your brain, every center does something, is responsible for something different, speech, sense of taste and smell, motor function, happiness, all the things, right? So maybe thinking about parts of the brain that might be interesting to you, what emotion, anger, fear, happiness, what emotion is interesting to you. Maybe is there a situation that causes an emotion that is interesting to you? So think of things like that where you can refine your question a little bit, because something as big as emotional intelligence, you're not going to solve.
Okay, maybe I don't know if this is something I could solve, but like how people detect emotions from like others, if that makes sense. I don't know.
So like interpersonal relationships, is that kind of what you're hinting at?
Yeah.
Okay. And so like let's see here. I'm going to start thinking of some ideas here. So it looks like, how does emotional intelligence affect interpersonal communication? Emotional intelligence improves your assertiveness by allowing you to communicate effectively. By being aware of your emotions, you have self-control and communicative about your thoughts clearly and with confidence. In turn, this will make you a more assertive, confident person. Have you ever done something called a literature review? Are you familiar with
Yes,
what that is?
that's
Okay,
actually what I'm doing currently. So,
wonderful.
yeah.
Okay. And you're familiar with what good sources of information would be versus maybe not so great sources?
They didn't explain like fully about that. All I know is I should just go onto Google Scholar and find information, but
Okay.
yeah.
So Google Scholar, a great place to start because that's where you're going to find academic journals. That's where you're going to find things that are called peer-reviewed journals,
Yeah.
where, other experts in the field have looked at this paper and they've given it their stamp that say that this is, good science, or, the research makes sense, the analysis makes sense, that kind of stuff. Another good way to tell what a good source would be is what is the website that you're on. So if you see something and it has maybe like the end.gov, NIH, so National Institutes for Health, Harvard, so something that is um, credible or accredited, would, for the most part, be considered a good place to find information. If you find something that maybe is .com, .co, something like that, you might just want to consider it a little bit more before you're like, this website says this, and that is law, that is science, someone put it on the internet, so it is true. So one thing as a scientist that you'll always, always, always want to do is you always want to question everything around you, and having that natural curiosity and that desire to you problem solve will always be probably some of the best skills you can ever develop. So
Okay.
consider that when you're looking. If you're on Google Scholar, I would be very surprised if you find anything that is, like junk science. But if you take your search outside of Google Scholar, because you're maybe trying, the problem with Google Scholar is you really need to know what words you're searching for. And
Yeah, that's true.
if you're trying to still figure out what your question is, you might just be bopping around the internet and searching a couple of different things here or there to just kind of maybe understand what is out there, and then take it to a credible source like Google Scholar and have the right words to search to look for the information.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think they just told us to stick to Google Scholar, so it's been really hard for me to find actual like credible,
See,
not credible, but like
good information,
information.
but you have to know how to use Google
Yeah.
Scholar for it to be as helpful as I think they intended it to be.
Yeah.
But it does look like I was seeing things about functional MRIs for NIH, and NIH, CDC, other places like that are more than likely going to have open data sets that are just downloadable, where somebody's done the research, they've taken all the identifying information out, and you can just download it and you can manipulate it however you want. You can do whatever you want with it. And that would be probably, because I don't know what research project you can set up from scratch on emotion,
Yeah.
unless Jan has ideas.
No, you're doing very well. um, but I think this would be something that you definitely could find a data set that would go, that you could use once you decide exactly what you want to look for.
Okay. Okay. So I shouldn't do it just from scratch. I should find the open data like sources and use those.
So not to deter you from doing it from scratch, but you're going to have a much, 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 much more refined question if you are going to do it from scratch. So
Oops.
you're
And
fine.
sometimes the rules are a little bit more relaxed in the middle school, and so you need to kind of find out exactly what they would want you to have, but come up with your idea. And I have, seen people win really good prizes with, I call them canned data sets, that exactly what Sandra's been speaking of. So, but yes, you're going to have to refine your question.
So here's some articles that I'm finding just to do some information dump for you. Emotional intelligence and nursing home performance among nursing students. The correlation between emotional intelligence and gray matter volume in university students. Emotional intelligence is emotional intelligence an advantage, an exploration of the impact of emotion and general intelligence on individual performance. And that's actually from, it looks like a sociology and psychology journal, which looks kind of close to what you've kind of expressed interest in. Emotional intelligence, no. It looks like there's something called a Mayer, I'm going to butcher this, Slavery Carrasco emotional intelligence test. So if this is something like 10, 15, 20 questions, something simple like that, you could do a survey where you survey individuals about their emotional intelligence, and then you can analyze that and, make some, make some conclusions based off of your survey population and their responses to said survey, if the survey is free, assuming that it's not behind a paywall or something like that. Let me see if I can find
So
this.
the first article you had, was it like emotional intelligence in quality of nursing care? Because that's what I found.
So that was one of them.
Yeah, okay. That's
Nurse Education Today is the journal, it looks like. But not to steer you away from that one, it just doesn't sound as close to maybe what you're interested in. But part of the lit review is just reading random, publications to just kind of understand the problem more, understand what's out there, what's being done, and take bits and pieces from everything. You might not find all the answers in one thing that interests you, but you get a little bit from everything, and then you put it together as it interests you and what you're interested in learning and what problem you're interested in solving or making better understood.
okay.
Hey, Sandra, are you familiar with that Stroop test, STROOP?
STROOP, Stroop test. I'm on PubMed right now. And let's see here. I have never heard of it, but
Well, I had a student use that one time. I can't remember exactly what it does, but it explores reaction and mental flexibility on some things. It looks at
it looks like Janet says here, influence of speed of visual search, verbal fluency, working memory, cognitive flexibility and conflict monitoring. So it looks interesting.
It really is. And that would be something that she could have access to.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at that right now. Give me a sec.
So the interesting thing about a test like that is you can design. So if the test exists and you're not changing the test, you're not creating a new test because that's not the purpose. The test has been created and has gone through trial and error and is said to work, right? But say you want to understand the emotional intelligence or whatever this is, the cognitive flexibility and the working memory of 8th graders. So you decide that you are going to use this test on your 8th grade class, or your 8th grade, all 8th graders in your school, and then you're going to look at all of those results and you're going to see what do I see that's consistent, or what is different? Is it different between girls and boys? Is it different between athletes and, maybe more studious people? Is it different between, older 8th graders than younger 8th graders? Because you can be a couple different ages in 8th grade. That would be really interesting. But however, if that was interesting to you, I guarantee you would need IRB.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
actually,
usually what that would probably consist of is just her writing it up, and then since that, I mean, I'm not suggesting the Stroop test, but I'm just saying there may be something out there if she wants to try to collect some data herself instead of using some other. Usually you just have to have a signed consent by the parents. You have to go through the IRB process and tell them what you're going to do and all of that. But usually it just, you don't identify any names or anything like that. And you have to have a signed consent by parents. But that may be too far off of what you're looking at. But I was just gonna throw that out there and I can't remember exactly how it all works, but
Dandon, I think that would be incredibly interesting, and maybe part of your exploring lit reviews more is maybe searching emotional intelligence tests that are publicly available.
yeah,
Because maybe it's not the Stroop test that's perfect for
right,
what
what
you're
you're
interested
looking
in. But there's all sorts of tests that have been created, tests for anxiety, tests for depression, tests
at.
for
Right.
this, that, and the other. So I'm willing to bet that if you look, you will find, and you might be able to find a test that aligns pretty closely with what you're interested in.
okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at that then. I'm writing some stuff down. So,
And since it's getting close to when they're going to kick us out of the rooms,
Right.
just know that even though you are Middle Tennessee, it doesn't mean that you can't send a question to that prep email, and they'll bring it up at the end, when they bring us back into the main room. Is you can send a question to that email that says, hey, I was talking to Jan and Sandra at last science fair, and they mentioned this. Could you ask them to clarify whatever? We, more than anything, is we want to see people interested in science and asking questions. So if we can help you
And getting your hands dirty.
yeah, if we can help you better define a question or make you more curious about science, and get you interested in submitting a science fair project, maybe not this year, but maybe definitely next year, or we're happy to support that however we can.
okay.
And Sandra is one of the best.
Yeah,
She
Jan
really
is being
is.
really nice.
No,
No, I got a
Andrew,
lot of information from you guys, so thank you.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting because this isn't my background. But just poking around with a couple of key words, knowing what good resources are, and just start. It's kind of like pulling on a thread. Soon you'll unravel the whole sweater if you're willing to be curious enough to ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah. What other questions do you have? Any questions?
Um, Not really. It's just like I'm still a little confused on how I should be narrowing down my question, like for the fair. But like you guys have already helped me, so I kind of have to think about it myself now.
So,
good.
yeah, kind of going back to some examples that I gave earlier. So, say you find a test that's publicly available and you decide you want to do a survey, but you survey all of these people and you kind of look at your results and see what's different, what stands out. What is the emotional intelligence of boys versus girls? What is the emotional intelligence of, you can do comparisons, like what are the differences in my study population, whether it's an age difference, a race or an ethnicity difference, which you could get into some that might be considered in some instances personally identifiable information if paired with other things, which might lead to some challenges, but I'm not going to fall down that rabbit hole right now. But so think of what the differences are. Is it age? Is it sex? Is it some sort of attribute like athleticism, wealth, so socioeconomic status or something like that. So look at what the differences are in a population. And one thing I would recommend is don't use small numbers in whatever data set you decide to use. Whether you pull something offline, whether you create a survey and survey a population, the smaller numbers you use, so say you survey 10 people, it's really easy to make false assumptions about that group. So if you had 2 out of 10 people that said that they love chocolate ice cream and everybody else likes vanilla ice cream, you can say that 80% of the population loves vanilla ice cream, but you only asked 10 people. That's very misleading. But if you ask 100 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people, so the bigger your sample population gets, when you start to see things stand out, they're more meaningful.
Okay.
So always beware of small data sets.
Okay.
Be misleading.
Yeah, I feel like if I used a smaller data set, it just wouldn't be as accurate.
Correct.
Right. And you just have to, address that, say that you realize that your numbers are small, but in the sampling that I was able to do.
Yeah, and
Okay.
at middle school science fair, a smaller number is totally fine and acceptable, but disclose, like Jan just said,
Right.
Why you used a smaller sample size and things like that, because this is your entrance into science. This is you starting your curiosity and your journey in STEM. So you don't have to, have a million people in your data set for your first ever science fair project. That's not super attainable or accomplishable, at this level, not because you're not motivated or interested enough, but you don't have the resources to do such a large scale project right now. So since we're going to get kicked out soon, that's just something to think about. Know that you can use the prep email to ask follow-up questions, because I know you were taking notes today. So
Okay.
something, isn't totally clear after you have time to sit with this information, reach back out to us.
Okay. Thank you.
And good luck.
Yes.
Thanks.